This episode of the Modern Therapist Survival Guide is brought to you by Healthcasters.
The Healthcasters is a podcasting course and community designed for therapists in private practice and therapists turned coaches and consultants that supported the successful launch of over 270 podcasts. Learn more about the Healthcasters at sellingthecouch.com/join the Healthcasters and enter the promo code Therapy Reimagine at checkout for $100 off the listed price.
Listen at the end of the episode for more information about Healthcasters.
You're listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide, where therapists live, breathe, and practice as human beings. To support you as a whole person and a therapist, here are your hosts, Kurt Widhelm and Katie Vernoy.
Welcome back, Modern Therapists. This is the Modern Therapist Survival Guide. I'm Kurt Widhelm with Katie Vernoy, and this is the podcast that is for therapists, about therapists, the things that we do, the values that we hold. And one of the things that's happened here in the therapy world in the last few weeks is there's a lot of online backlash against the company Brighter Vision. Brighter Vision is somebody who we formerly had a sponsorship with in the past. But there is a backlash that was happening around Brighter Vision's partnership with a company called BetterHelp. And you can check out our previous episode about some of these therapy apps, and we'll link to that in our show notes over at mtsgpodcast.com. Now, over the course of a weekend, what we saw was Brighter Vision announced this partnership, a tremendous pressure put in to Brighter Vision by the online therapist communities. And just a few days later, Brighter Vision announced that they were no longer going to be partnered with BetterHelp. Through all of this, one of our friends and previous guest, Jeff Gunther, he's a LPC up in the Portland area. You might know him from TherapyDen and a lot of the other cool stuff that he does, reached out to me and said, "Hey, I have a story about some of these partnerships." And we were like, "Please come back to the podcast as soon as possible." And so welcome back, Jeff, and thank you for spending some time with us.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, and I can't wait to talk to you guys about this.
So we've asked you this question before, and people can go back and listen to a previous episode, but I'd love for you to tell people, who are you and what are you putting out into the world now? Because I know there's some updates and some good stuff, and then intros for our new listeners.
Sure. I am Jeff Gunther. One of my big projects that I've been working on since 2017, is a national therapist directory called TherapyDen. You can go to therapyden.com to visit it. It's progressive and all-inclusive therapist directory. It came from like my hatred for Psychology Today. And especially back in 2017 and before, Psychology Today felt like very behind in the times. So I was like, you know what, there should be a better option for this. And there are some other therapist directories, and I wanted to jump into the therapist directory game. I have made like a pretty successful therapist directory locally for Portland. So I was taking all of my skills and applying it to the national therapist directory so it can make it progressive and it can be anti-racist and social justice-y and make it so that like therapists ask therapists to be a little bit more authentic in their profile, so you can like really get to know who the therapist is and what they're all about. Trying to get the therapist to share their values and beliefs and all that good stuff. Started working on that in 2017. It launched in 2018, and it's been growing ever since then. And it's been a really fun ride and also a roller coaster. One of my more interesting experiences was BetterHelp coming to me and looking for a partnership. But there's been many organizations out there looking for partnerships. And I kind of use that in air quotes because some of them are really looking to partner with you to like enhance your brand. And like Yahoo came to TherapyDen not too long ago being like, "Hey, we want to feature you on our like mental health page." And it was all on the up and up, and it's great. Unfortunately, as we know, not a lot of people use Yahoo. But still very exciting to partner with Yahoo, like a very recognized brand. I wish them the best. Then there's other companies that are like wanting to partner that really just want to buy out TherapyDen or really want to sell marketing services to TherapyDen or want to make money off of us. So yeah, so there's been like a lot of really interesting conversations that I've had.
I don't know whether to just kind of tease this BetterHelp story to get people to listen to the entire episode or to follow our normal pattern of asking, for those people who are looking to partner with some of these companies, how do you sift out some of the, these are the ones that are good versus these are the ones that maybe don't have the best interests of what I've got going on in mind. Katie and I get approached very much in the same way by a number of different companies. What are some of the experiences that you've had that have led you to better understanding where some of these intentions are? Because some of these people have great marketing teams that know how to talk around some of the more inexperienced people. So how can we help people maybe not make some of the same mistakes?
I don't know. I'm still trying. I still try to figure that out, and I still struggle with it sometimes. There's like a group of people, sort of like techie investors, Silicon Valley sorts of bros that like reach out to me every now and then to want to learn, and they want to learn more about TherapyDen, this therapy directory, like how to match therapists with clients, because they are creating a very similar product.
Yeah.
Where they're creating a matching service, and they have some new innovative way that they think is going to like blow the pants off of the industry that I and many other people have thought about and tried to implement and failed or didn't fail, but they have the secret sauce. Mm-hmm. But really, like, they want to get like all the information, all the data from me, either to like kind of steal my ideas or improve on their own ideas, or to possibly buy me out. And so whenever there's like tech companies that are coming to like ask me about TherapyDen, I'm always very guarded and I hold everything close to my chest. So if somebody like finds me and reaches out to me through LinkedIn, automatically, I don't want to respond to them. I hate LinkedIn. I don't know how you feel about LinkedIn, but that already feels very shady to me.
Yeah.
And then there's, I usually respond like just yesterday morning, somebody was reaching out to me through LinkedIn saying like, hey, I'd love to partner with you. And I said, if you're selling marketing services, I don't want to talk to you. That's usually like my first response. Mm-hmm. And then if they continue to kind of try to get to me, and I might have a phone call with them, but you can tell if somebody's being salesy with you, or like offering you the world. Or, I mean, it just doesn't, if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. There was another company, they were thinking about buying out TherapyDen. And that was like, I was like, I don't know. And so I had to do like a lot of research to figure out like, who are they? Are they good? Are they bad? I don't know. It never actually went through. It was just sort of like couldn't align, I guess. But I guess the answer to the question is like, how does it feel? How does it feel when somebody's reaching out to you? And really, I got a really good feeling from like all the folks at Yahoo who are just like, really clearly into like mental health and wanted to put together resources that was like really good for the community. I don't know. What do you both think?
I do most of these conversations. And so I think for me, I think there are times probably when I'm swayed by the relationship, I start to get to know somebody, we have more conversations. I think the independent research is important because when you're getting on a call with somebody, they are going to have the story. Like, this is the reason. And I think about, I've talked to a lot of tech startups. I don't have the same conflict because it's not a competing business. In fact, we want therapists to find the right directories. We want therapists to find the right resources. And so that's why we want to feature TherapyDen on our site. There's those kinds of things. But I think when I start feeling like there's two different types, I think, of these tech companies. Some of them are, let's commoditize this. How can we get the most profit? And there's a lot of folks, and most of these are the ones that I think are not as successful. And so they're wanting advice and they're probably wanting, free research from you and stuff like that, where they've started their heart's in the right place. They're getting out of the big tech world. And one of their family members has had a mental health issue and they couldn't find the resources they needed. They found this gap and they wanted. So, I mean, it's like, I've heard this story a number of times.
Oh, so many times.
And there's somewhere I get to know them better. I'm like, these are really cool people and they've got the right people on their team. I like their team members. I'm seeing how they're supporting good mental health. I'm seeing how they're supporting clinicians. And then there's others where I'm like, what are you doing? And some of it's the instinct, but some of it is just kind of going through and doing the research and then trying to see if you can find people who are in these systems to see, does it actually feel good? Is it actually working? Are they having any moral qualms about the therapy that they're able to provide, or the money that they're getting for the work that they're doing? But it's so hard because the exceptionally good marketing teams are going to come with these amazing, heart-wrenching stories. They're going to be super friendly. And I think it's just, you just got to do the background legwork and try to be objective, which is hard. We are saying that we're grappling with these decisions, and potentially there are times when really, really nice arrangements or sizable money or sizable visibility can happen from these partnerships. And we can make wrong decisions. We can always walk them back and do different things, but it seems like Brighter Vision and other therapist B2B companies or therapist influencers, people are getting a big backlash for partnering with BetterHelp. I have my own opinion, but you've actually interacted with BetterHelp. They reached out to us and were like, "We'd like to talk about your employment practices." I didn't hear anything else after that. And so why do you think there's such a big backlash against Brighter Vision and these other folks who've decided to partner with BetterHelp?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons for that. And we all have maybe our own personal reasons. So Brighter Vision, like my sort of experience of who they are and their company, it seemed like, it was Perry, the owner and starter, but now not the owner, president.
Yeah, I think they just sold.
They
the company,
sold.
Yeah.
It seemed like Perry was like, "Hey, I want to start this service. I want to make websites for therapists." And there isn't a lot of good options out there. Great. And then he did it, and then he became successful, and he created this little team, and it seemed like they were very personable. We knew who Perry was and what Brighter Visions was all about. And they were in all of the little therapist private practice groups on Facebook and yada, yada. And we knew them. It felt like they were on our team. They were on our side. And that felt nice. And so then all of a sudden they announced this partnership with BetterHelp, who I think a lot of us think is the bad guy. And it was very much what I thought. Maybe you know more about Perry and Brighter Visions, but it seemed like it was out of line with who they are and what their values are and their support that they had for therapists. And the deal didn't seem to make sense. I don't know the details. I'm sure it made sense on their end, but it was kind of bizarre that they were trying to help BetterHelp get more therapists to subscribe to their services. That I'm not sure how it connects with therapists creating websites through them. So that was funky. And I was super impressed. Maybe this has happened before and I hadn't seen it before, but I was super impressed with the community, the mental health community, and all the therapists that were just no, this is not okay. And they flooded Brighter Visions and they flooded all the therapist groups and created this organic campaign to contact Perry and not allow this to happen. So that was super impressive and very exciting, and made me think that we do have a lot of power if we can all come together and do something. It didn't feel right. It felt really gross. Partnership didn't make sense. I think a lot of people have a really good, fuzzy, nice feeling about Brighter Visions. So partnering with BetterHelp I didn't understand it.
I think the thing that felt, I don't know about icky, but I think the thing that felt weird to me is that the idea around Brighter Vision is that they are creating they're helping therapists create websites for their own practices. And and BetterHelp is actually actively in competition. And so it's you're funneling the competition and you're also helping your therapists who are your customers or potential customers to basically get bogged down in the BetterHelp world where you're not going to make any money and you're too busy and blah, blah, blah. I think they came back with hey, people who are just starting out, sometimes BetterHelp is a good way for them to make some money while they're growing their own practice. And so it was that's what we were thinking about, but I don't know.
I think we have to also put this into the context of what impact these tech companies are having on our industry, because as you're both speaking, that there seems to be this push away from you as the individual therapists and more into kind of, helping somebody get better stock returns, on the at New York Stock Exchange here at some point. And that really goes against what I think all of our values are here, which is really taking care of the individuals, having you as the individuals be seen. And I think that a lot of the people that we share in our audience in these Facebook groups as listeners of our podcast here, attendees of our conference, people who use TherapyDen, that we come in as caring individuals and are tired of being cogs in a machine. And so this really inconsistent message seems to be something where it's very easy to fear, like, hey, this is just shoving a burnout machine away from community mental health and now into kind of just a more corporate sort of therapy delivery service.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, like BetterHelp doesn't care about helping people. I mean, I think they think they like care about helping, padding their bottom line and giving money back to their investors and making a ton of money. I think you mentioned maybe earlier before we started recording, like they're also into data mining. They take your data and they sell it to Facebook and Google and Pinterest. So even if somebody like goes on to BetterHelp, a person goes on to BetterHelp to like find a therapist and fills out an intake form, that intake form, even before they start like a subscription, that info on that intake form is sent to advertisers that are looking for that like want to know more about you. So Facebook can know the last time you wanted to commit suicide. So Pinterest can know every time you open up that app and talk about how depressed you are. BetterHelp isn't like looking at the exact language that a client and a therapist is like putting into the app, but they're collecting like the metadata around it. So it's just sort of like get this kind of like idea of who you are, and then they apply it to your sort of like online profile so that Facebook can like sell you more products that depressed people buy or anxious people buy or people with trauma buy. They create, and so as a therapist in private practice, like all of us that are probably listening, we would never sell our clients' data to other people. But like that's a big part of BetterHelp's money-making scheme because they need to make that money and they make a ton of money off of that. And it reminds me, so I worked for this really weird, funny, well, not very funny, but just like a weird company in Portland when I first got my master's degree. And they were hiring people with a master's degree in counseling that also had a voice. So they could like pick up a phone and be on this crisis line. But it was a for-profit crisis line, which is weird and bizarre. Weird. And every time us therapists would pick up the phone, that business would make $15. And so they kept on they're like, you're not allowed to talk for over 12 minutes to somebody who's in a crisis. You got to like get them off the phone and get them off the phone. The more people that you answer, the more they'll make money. And we just sort of like became this like weird little machine where we're just trying to answer as many phone calls as we possibly could. There was these literal alarm bells going off if we're on the phone too long.
Oh no, that's awful. That sounds like a horrible job.
It was horrible. I, in the middle of it, applied to work at the Apple store because I was like, I can't be a therapist anymore if this is what it's all about. God. Anyways, it feels very similar to BetterHelp where they're just like, they're there to like make money, and the more that they can get people to sign up, the more money they're going to make.
Yeah, I think there's also, and I don't know if this was involved in any of the folks who I've seen in partnership with BetterHelp, but it seems like there's also large, kind of investment cycles. And so if you can say, I have this many therapists in my whatever, in my network, and then there's more likely that you'll get some angel investor money.
Yeah. And BetterHelp is like they're trying to corner every single way a person is looking for therapy. We've seen all their ads on Facebook and we've seen their ads on TV, and they're gobbling up therapist directories one by one, trying to so they have a bunch of therapist directories. What do they have? They have pridecounseling.com to corner like the LGBTQ market. They have faithfulcounseling.com for the biblical perspective. They have teencounseling.com. The list goes on where they just like make these make-believe therapist directories, or they find a therapist directory and buy them out. You know Clay Cockrell from onlinecounseling.com?
No, I don't know.
I know
You know of it?
onlinecounseling.com. Yeah.
Yeah. BetterHelp presented him with like the same deal partnership that they presented to me, and he decided to take it. I like Clay. Clay's a great guy. I'm like not trying to shit on Clay. He's fantastic. And he made a good financial decision for himself. Very good. But if you go to like onlinecounseling.com, which then forwards you to onlinetherapy.com, which then forwards you to like BetterHelp therapists, like they're just looking to like gobble up all the SEO, all the websites out there. You know, like they're very savvy in what they're doing.
How does that impact our industry then? If the more they're successful with these partnerships and gobbling up every entry point for therapy and all of, large groups of therapists?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they're taking all of our clients and they're conditioning clients to, and they're not clients, they're subscribers, right? So they're conditioning clients to like think that this is what therapy is for. And I don't think that it's good to have 24-hour access 7 days a week to your therapist. That doesn't feel healthy to me. But it's like, it's the Uber of therapy. It's and therapists at BetterHelp get paid by the word. Like, and you're not allowed to like type 2 times the amount of words that your client is typing, or else you're not going to get paid for it. So there's like, you're not going to get paid in certain ways when you're a BetterHelp therapist, and you're just not going to like provide the counseling to that client because you're not going to get paid for it anyways, or you have to make this fucked up decision. So it's really creating these really weird expectations for clients. The taxi business isn't really here anymore because Uber and Lyft took it over. That can happen to us if BetterHelp and Talkspace and other Silicon Valley companies keep taking it over. But Katie, you mentioned that there are some good guys.
I think
right?
so, but I'm hopefully I'm not being duped, but I think so.
Yeah, I'm not super aware of like all the good guys, but I'm totally open to hearing about who they are, so I can look into that.
I mean, I think Kurt and I had talked about it, and I think the strongest ones are the ones that actually do an employment model so that therapists who are working for them are able to unionize. They can do some of these things. They can have the benefits of being employees. I think there's arguments for extended provider networks being also helpful for folks who don't want to be employees and just want a couple of clients that are, through insurance or whatever. But I think there may be negative. Kurt's informed me there could be very negative things on that end if we have too many kind of contractor models. And he and I will probably have a whole other conversation about this so we can go in deeper. But to me, there's some therapists who I think don't really want to be private practitioners, and they don't really fit into an agency or community mental health kind of model. And so being able to be employed by Lyra is one of the ones that we've talked to that seem really nice, or some of these other employers, like gigantic employers. It's like, it's a dream because you get to see ideal clients for a good salary in kind of a more similar to a private practice model. And you can be an employee and just do it. And so it's like, you just get to focus on therapy. You don't have to figure out how to market, because I don't think all therapists should be private practitioners. So I think that there are some folks who are increasing access while still taking care of therapists and doing good clinical work. Now, they may take away our clients. And so there's the competition element, but I don't know that it's all bad.
Yeah, no, it's probably not all bad.
There's a tremendous amount of money that these companies are throwing out for advertising, for partnerships, for any of these, gobbling up companies as you're describing here. And a lot of this money is coming from either, conglomerate corporation type things to, kind of change the market and have, billionaires funding some of this stuff going on. I want to get a little bit to your story. And when you presented me with the number that you did, as far as the amount of money that they were approaching you, and I've been approached to sell out my practice by not this BetterHelp company, but I was like, wow, that is a tremendous amount of money for myself. How is this money impacting us? You and I have made decisions to stay with what we're doing at this point, but we see our friends, our other people in the community who are partnering up. We see these businesses partnering up. What are we seeing as far as, companies like ours that are just kind of still, fighting the good fight here?
It's, you base your company or your service on like what feels like the right values, and you have like a great mission and you stand behind it, and it is who you are. That's like your identity, and you create this business, and lots of other therapists or therapy users resonate with it. And then you have these big companies like BetterHelp who approached me in July 2019. So it was like pretty soon after like TherapyDen, the therapist directory, launched. Also, I'm like the majority owner of TherapyDen. I also have a couple business partners who actually work on the site, who are like, the developer of the site and then the user experience person. So we're all just like working on the site and doing our day jobs. So I would have to like get their okay to partner with BetterHelp for like the partner for the deal that they were offering us. But I'm like the therapist and the face of the company. And I'll get into the details about what they offered TherapyDen. But when they offer you a ton of money, I felt like just throwing away all of my values, because there's a certain amount of money that I would sell myself for, I think.
Oh yeah, you can
right?
totally buy new values and morals with the amount of money that they're offering.
Right. To get into the nitty-gritty a little bit, they're like VP of business development shot me an email and was like, "Hey, love TherapyDen, what you're doing, your mission, your values. I stand behind it. This is fantastic, blah, blah, blah. And I can see that you don't offer a lot of options for online therapists." And we were just starting to like integrate that into TherapyDen. We're only like providing therapists for in-person therapy, and then we're like adding online therapists. And so we had just launched that. And when you click like the online therapists in this state button, nothing was showing up because nobody was signing up yet. But we were building and yada yada. And he was like, "So if you want BetterHelp therapists to be integrated into your therapy directory, then those could be the search results that come up and are displayed for online therapists." So we'll like integrate all of our therapists. They'll have these sort of pretend listings on TherapyDen. And when somebody goes and hits like the contact button or wants to call them, it goes right to like BetterHelp, and they sign up through BetterHelp. So these aren't actual therapists in private practice on TherapyDen, right? There's like these BetterHelp workers. So that didn't feel good. It felt like that was like bad user experience. I'm also deceiving the potential client that's looking for a therapist, that thinks that they're looking for a therapist in Santa Monica, California, but really it's just some random BetterHelp person. But what he was offering was like every time somebody clicks on a BetterHelp therapist in your TherapyDen listing and they sign up for an account, even if it's just a free account at first month or first week free, we will give you $300.
Whoa.
And let's say I would have taken that deal and TherapyDen would have continued to grow at the pace that it would have grown at, which probably wouldn't have happened, or maybe would have happened even more. I don't know. Let's say that like I'm getting, a small chunk of, we measure how many people are getting referrals through TherapyDen. If we took like a percentage of the people getting referrals through TherapyDen, maybe like a small percentage of it, like 1,000 people a month or something. If 1,000 people a month were connecting with these BetterHelp therapists, we'd get about $300,000 a month, probably a lot more though. So he was saying like, you'll eventually get between maybe like $250,000 to $500,000 a month if you let us put these BetterHelp practitioners in your therapist directory, which I don't know if that would have like cannibalized the therapist directory. It would have probably become just like Pride Counseling or teencounseling.com or whatever, where they just would have taken it over. But we would have made a ton of money. And if it still would have been going on today, we'd be making hundreds of thousands of dollars, at least at minimum, per month.
How do you pass up that money? Like, honestly, like I mean, we all have our dollar amount, and as I was sitting here since you reached out to me, it's from when Jeff first reached out to me to record dates, it's been about a week and a half. I'm like, for a couple $1 million a year, like I could do basically whatever I want, and like then you just start going down like kind of that fantasy, like, oh, what do I really want to do? But that's really not worth doing $2 million a year. Like, how do you pass up that kind of money? And on top of that, they're offering therapists like $500 like one time to sign up for this stuff. So like, hold out, people. Like, you can get more than $500.
Exactly. There's like this capitalist inside of me, like it's inside of everybody, I'm sure, that really regrets not taking that deal and just cashing out. How do I pass it up? Oh, there's a big part of me that's kicking myself for passing it up. Another part of me, there's like a real deep-seated, like angsty teenager inside of me that's always like, fuck the man. And BetterHelp felt like the man. And it felt like selling out. So there was that. I didn't want to be a sellout. It was, I don't know, like, I was a teenager in the 90s, and selling out was the worst thing you could be. And so that's very embedded into my DNA. I think, and this is like part of my, I don't know, something, ego or whatever, but like, I think TherapyDen can be even bigger than what BetterHelp is offering me. I think that it can be even more successful. So I'm like, 2 million, fuck you, 2 million. How about 20 million? Like, that's what I think TherapyDen is worth. It's not worth that. But maybe it will be eventually. And that's what I hope. Like I was saying, like, you're going to sell out. You're going to get like, shamed. And I might not be able to create any other therapy products ever again. I might not be able to be taken seriously. I was just starting to podcast at that time, and I really wanted to be an authority, and I wanted to be taken seriously. And I felt like that would like really, like, it was too early for me to sell out. I think there's like a lot more good that I have that I want to contribute to the industry.
If you're from BetterHelp and you're listening, call me.
Kurt's ready to sell us out, or just personally you're ready to sell out, because we can still keep our stuff. Is that what you're telling me?
BetterHelp was also kind of breaking it down. Like, so we'll pay you $300 a referral, and they make on average $1,200 per subscriber. So they're totally willing to make that bet, and they might be making more than that. But back 2 or so years ago, I was like, yeah, not a bad return on investment, paying $300 to make $1,200. I think anybody would probably want that. So like, it just sort of like made financial sense to them, and it felt gross. And there's a part of me that regrets it. I'm like mostly proud of myself for not selling out.
I think there's a part of me that's maybe a little Pollyanna-ish or naive, but I think there's this, well, if I had that kind of money, I could do a lot of real good in the world. Now, if you've sold yourself out and you've cannibalized a really important product that you provide or a service that you provide, I think that becomes very hard to do. So I appreciate that part of what you were saying, because I think, like, well, if somebody were to give me $500,000 a month, there is so much I could do with that money.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't matter if I've like basically gone to the dark side. So,
yeah. And I wonder how much money BetterHelp was going to give Brighter Vision. If they're making $1,200 off one subscriber / client, how much money are they making when they hire a therapist? A therapist is going to bring in a ton of money for them.
Yeah.
So Perry and Brighter Vision were probably were offered like a pretty sweet partnership deal. So for them,
they were going to give 6 months free of their service, which is like $70. So
a month. Yeah.
$70 a month. So
500-ish.
So they were giving away $500 worth of services. So they must be getting at least $1,500, right? Like, you don't
at least
do
at the
more
very
than that.
least.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I guess we don't know. We're
I don't know.
purely conjecture, but
We do have to wrap up here today. And, I think that this is something where Katie and I, and all the time that we've known Jeff as well, can really speak to having a values-driven business model. And while that may not necessarily be in the most rewarding way in our pocketbook when compared to some of the alternatives here, it is something where you can know that standing behind companies like TherapyDen and Katie and myself with Therapy Reimagined and the podcast here, that we do really take the effort to look at who it is that we partner with. And in order to remain consistent to who we are, we know Jeff is a stand-up person, and really because of this history and knowing some of these decisions that we all make in this makes it to where, we're hoping to leave this field a better place for all of us. And we encourage you to do the same kinds of things for yourself and for the industry as well. And so, in keeping with all of this stuff, how can people stay updated with what you've got going on, Jeff?
Yeah, they can go ahead and create a profile. Therapists can go ahead and create a profile at therapyden.com. It's totally free. You'll be added to the newsletter. You can contact me at hello@therapyden.com. It goes right to my inbox. I love to reply to all of those messages. I also produce a podcast called the Swoon Podcast. It's about love and sex and relationship advice. And I want to just sort of end this being there are lots of therapists and businesses that are creating value-based products and services. And as therapists, we can tell who those companies are. And I want you all to just say no to BetterHelp and Talkspace and companies like that. They're not serving us, and they're changing our industry in some of the worst ways possible. If I would have let BetterHelp integrate their listings into TherapyDen, then you wouldn't have been able to filter for therapists that are queer competent and trans competent. They don't ask for that sort of information from their therapists. They don't have that data. The whole progressive filtering system on TherapyDen, which is the heart of the website, wouldn't exist because they don't really care about figuring out competencies or asking for therapists' beliefs and values and all of the stuff that clients are really interested in right now. Sorry, that was a little bit of a soapbox. You should sign up for TherapyDen. It's totally free. If you want to pay, you can. You can choose to pay for your subscription. You can choose to pay $10, $20, or $30 per month or $0 a month. It's totally up to you.
And we'll include links to all of Jeff's stuff in our show notes at mtsgpodcast.com. Also, check out the Therapy Reimagined conference. It's coming up in a hybrid format here at the end of September. You can get all of the latest updates at therapyreimaginedconference.com or on our social media. And Katie and I will be we'll have a presentation at this conference. And the focus of it is really going to be about having a practice that can be values driven, while companies like BetterHelp and Talkspace and all of these ones exist around us, and taking lessons learned from industries like taxis and Blockbuster and helping us to not make the same kinds of mistakes. So look out for that content, as well as a ton of our great speakers, therapyreimaginedconference.com. And until next time, I'm Kurt Whithelm with Katie Vernoy and Jeff Gunther.
Thanks again to our sponsor, the Healthcasters.
Wanted to tell you guys a little bit of what's included in the Healthcasters podcasting course. It includes simple step-by-step videos to take your podcast from idea to one that generates income when it launches. Also includes cheat sheets and templates Dr. Melvin Varghese uses for the Selling the Couch podcast, whether it's scripts to reach out to guests or templates to let guests know that a podcast is live. They recently released the podcast episode tracker. The simple sheet helps to keep your podcast episodes organized, whether you want to reference them later or repurpose them for content in the future. You can also choose to upgrade the purchase of the course to the community of over 250 other therapist podcasts. This includes monthly group one-on-one coaching calls with Melvin. And you can learn more about Healthcasters at sellingthecouch.com. Join the Healthcasters.
Enter the promo code Therapy Reimagined at checkout for $100 off the listed price. And just a reminder, that's sellingthecouch.com/join the Healthcasters.
Thank you for listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide. Learn more about who we are and what we do at mtsgpodcast.com. You can also join us on Facebook and Twitter. And please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our episodes.